So, hey, thanks for joining, Brad. It's awesome to see you. We haven't chatted in a while, so this is going to be a good catch up.
That's exactly right. It's my pleasure. It's great to see you again, brother.
Yeah. So, just by means of a bit of an overview, Brad and I we worked together a number of years ago at Akamai, where you were the chief marketing officer and senior vice president of channels and alliances globally. And since then, you've been on quite the journey with moving on from Akamai, moving into Eze Software. You moved on to Carbon Black, where you were the chief marketing officer, who were purchased by VMware,
That's
I
right.
think.
That's
And
right.
then and currently you are the EVP and Chief Marketing Officer at Infoblox.
That's right.
So a fairly storied career, mate, in everything SaaS, security, all of that. Can you give us the couple-minute overview, I guess, of where you've been and where you've come from, just for the viewers?
Yeah, sure. No, it's been a really fun ride, and I've had the absolute pleasure to work for five, if you count the VMware acquisition, fantastic companies that were in various stages of their growth when I joined them, and at Akamai I had a great opportunity to join them when they were less than $100 million. Ended up leaving around 1.9 billion dollars in revenue when I left and went over to Eze Software to help them do an interesting transformation from kind of an on-prem to a SaaS model, and they got purchased by a large strategic, and then I left and went over to Carbon Black and was at Carbon Black helping them do a transition from an on-prem to a SaaS model, which in turn, as a security company, they got bought by VMware. Stayed with VMware for about a year after the acquisition to kind of help them get that all integrated, and then just recently went over to Infoblox about 9 months ago or so, and stop if you heard this story again, helping them going from an on-prem to a SaaS model as well. So that seems to be, I guess, my specialty these days. But it's been a fun journey and a lot of fun working with some great teams as they make that transition. It's an interesting transition to make, and not always an easy one, but we've had some good success along the way.
Yeah, cool. And so do you feel like, did you just find yourself like falling into that kind of the on-prem place as well? Because you've also got, I guess, from a functional standpoint, same as if you're getting in somewhat at the smaller side of some of these companies, and then your ability to actually grow and scale these teams.
That's right. That's right. And I think that I don't think I would take an opportunity where it was a large, multi-billion-dollar company that was a SaaS company, or even an on-prem company that was trying to go SaaS at that size. That's a very tough pivot for that size company. And so, I've been focusing on working with companies. So I guess Eze was around, I don't know, $250 million in revenue. Carbon Black was probably around that size. Infoblox was a little larger than that. In fact, we just hit 500 million in annual recurring revenue. So that's on a pretty good trajectory. But at that size, at that kind of 200 to 500 million-dollar mark, there are fundamental things that you can set in motion that will set you up for success. And if you're a $2 billion company and you're on-prem trying to move to SaaS, there's a lot of technical and process and business debt that you have to kind of slog through. And quite honestly, I don't know if I have the patience at my age to go through all that stuff. So I really target into those companies that are a little more malleable, I guess, as you will.
Yeah. That's cool, because there is that I guess, where they talk about the executives or the people with their skill sets who have the ability to take a company from one place to another.
Right.
And then I think it is something like incredibly important, where people understand that and go, I think I've probably taken this as far as what I can.
Right.
And then they allow that next person to come in, or that next team, or whatever it may be. And you mentioned the foundations as well. That's something that we're just so big, and I feel like so many organizations just don't have that right foundation in place. And that's around the systems, the processes, the people, and all that. And can we expand a bit on that? Because I'd love to learn more.
Yeah, listen, I think that especially when you're trying to make that transition, from on-prem to SaaS, but really at any company when you're trying to move from that phase of around 100 to $200 million and try to get that to that next milestone of a $500 million and ultimately to $1 billion. There are a number of things that you need to make sure you put in place at each one, kind of each one of these milestone phases. And quite honestly, a lot of that has to do with the go-to-market arm, as it sits. The cadence and the processes we put in place and the alignment between sales and marketing, making sure that we're completely in sync and collaborative on how we go to market, and not just what the messages are, but where are we targeting our demand generation and awareness dollars to support the growth goals of the field, and specifically what are the ideal customer profiles that they're trying to hit, and make sure that we're spending our time and effort and monies on those. That's relatively fundamental, but quite honestly, too many times I've seen companies where the marketing was kind of driving this way and the sales organization was driving that way, and so we're trying to get that in line. But it's interesting because when you're thinking about annual recurring revenue or monthly recurring revenue, subscription SaaS-based modeling, we take for granted, maybe you and I, because we kind of grew up in that model with Akamai, that everybody kind of understands that model, but it's not the case, and especially with these either large service-based systems or specifically the on-prem, where they're used to large multi-year hardware maintenance agreements, product refreshes. So all of a sudden the box that they sold 5 years ago is no longer in support, so they just simply go back into the company and go, hey, that's out of support, here's the new box, here's the invoice, they get a signature and they walk off, and that's the end of that. They don't really go back until that box is out of date. As you know, that doesn't really work in the SaaS world. It's a land and expand model, right? So getting an entire go-to-market arm, sales and marketing, to think about, all right, let's go out and get new logos, and that's our first line of order. The next thing we got to do is now expand within those new logos. How do we cross-sell, upsell, build, sell more of the platform, so we're getting larger average selling prices to our per customer, and trying to grow the number of customers that are paying us over 30, 40, 50, $100,000 or whatever price of your product it is, to grow that customer base up. And the larger number of customers you have, paying you on a recurring basis, the more predictable your company is when it comes to revenue. You can forecast better. There's so many more financial metrics that are solid and predictable, that you don't have to worry. Obviously cash and everything else that goes along with that, cash flow and everything that goes along with that. But then it even comes down to things like pipeline management. Like right now, at Infoblox, I'm working with our chief revenue officer, and we're literally in lockstep focused on pipeline and how, what are the sources feeding pipeline? Channels, marketing, and sales. What does the pipeline look at? Looking at the lens of volume, value, velocity, and then shape, and trying to make sure the marketers, the channel organization, and sales understands those four lenses and how we look at pipeline, and what's a healthy pipeline, and from a marketing standpoint, how fast are we filling that pipeline, and in a high quality, so we can once again hit those revenue targets. It's just a continual collaboration and alignment between once again the field organization and the marketing organization. And as back when we were at Akamai in the marketing department, our alignment to sales was once again in lockstep. That chasm that always exists just has to be as small as possible. It will always be there, but trying to make that minuscule and almost non-existent is the key. So anyway.
Yeah, that's really interesting. That's really interesting. Because one of the big things that I guess one of the trends, and you can call it a trend, but I mean it really is just the way of doing business now, is verticalized growth plans. They say so, and how it's just highly cross-functional. So particularly if you're entering, like you nailed it on the head, where you go, sales solves everything. And so
Yep.
you've got to chase the logos, very, very first thing. And so how is it that you then do that? Well, with a verticalized growth plan and then bring in the functions. And is that how it sounds like you're doing that with sales? So
Yep.
there's the cross function there. You've got what, like a target key accounts or target industries or a North Star.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're bringing in sales enablement, you're bringing in product marketing, you're bringing all of that basically just to see that everybody is aligned and going after one target.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I think that we saw this at Akamai. It was the same at Carbon Black, especially when VMware bought us, and definitely the same here at Infoblox. Infoblox was built, you've got 20-year history of being really the kind of the world's trusted vendor when it comes to DNS management. Basically, managing all the devices connecting to the network and the internet within an enterprise. So that's kind of the history of the company. And now they've taken that history of DNS and expertise within the DNS systems and IP management, and now ported it over to a security product that's very interesting. It's relatively unique in the space, leveraging the DNS information as well as the DNS protocol as a vector, as a threat vector within security to secure an enterprise. So now you're taking a bunch of reps who are used to selling hardware, and now trying to get them to sell software as a service security. That is no easy feat. And I saw the same thing when VMware bought Carbon Black, the security company, to put it in their portfolio of networking products. And they had a huge sales team that was full of network-focused sellers, trying to get them to go across the aisle into the security department and start talking all the crazy security languages. They just it's very hard and long chasm to cross. But at the end of the day, what we have is now a portfolio of we've taken that DNS technology and turned it into a software as a service, especially applicable in today's kind of hybrid cloud world where you don't necessarily have hardware devices in places; it's all in the cloud. So we have a software as a service DNS system. We have a security DNS system, and now we're coming out with a whole nother product set that's going to work within this kind of the SD-WAN and SD web application firewall and VPN VPN systems. So really kind of three major areas. So we've got to have sales specialists that are able to sell security, because the networking people still are worried about going in and talking to a CISO, and we have to go in and once again land the initial deal with a DNS sell, then go back in and expand to a security, and ultimately now going to go in and expand with this other aspect of the networking piece. From a verticalized standpoint, we had a very vertical friendly portfolio at Akamai, right? We had media services that were very applicable to the media entertainment industry. We had acceleration systems that were very applicable that we can apply in one value proposition to the retail business, and another value proposition to the banking industry, another value proposition to manufacturing. So we were able to kind of adapt that value proposition. It's a little more nuanced at Infoblox, because the value proposition is relatively homogenous across the verticals, but we can teach the sellers, and we can use marketing messaging that's at least more specific to the vertical, right? Like when we're talking to healthcare, the management and security of devices in a healthcare industry is the same as the security and the management of devices in a manufacturing, but the implications of something going wrong are vastly different. So when we start talking about the pain and telling the story of the product to a healthcare company, it would be different to the story that we're telling to a manufacturer or a retailer or so forth. So there's nuances there. It isn't necessarily set up for verticalized or specialized products, but certainly the messaging that's there. And it's interesting because if you think about the way we would take things to market in a verticalized market, you can see how the exact same thing applies to local markets in a global economy, right? The same way we have to adapt our messaging for the retail customer versus the healthcare customer is the same way we have to adapt our messaging for the Japanese market versus the Dubai market or versus the U.S. market. And I think that as marketers, especially westernized marketers out of the U.S., we may forget how important that step is, and how, you know, let's say how hard, but how complex that might be, and how we might be taking our assumptions as truths, when in fact, there's a lot more to be learned as American headquartered businesses, when doing business in all these other countries, and in all the different ways that they like to hear messages, and they like to be approached from a marketing or sales standpoint, or sold to, and they won't buy unless they buy through a partner, and if we try to do that direct, well, we'll never be successful. We don't know those things, and those are the interesting things that I think that learnings over the years that we had to make mistakes, and it cost time to market because we were making those mistakes, and it was great to make them because we learned them, and then we were able to be better at them. But that time to market mistakes that it could be a 12 or 18 month situation where we've delayed our ability to generate revenue in markets. So yeah. There's a lot of an analogy to that verticalized marketing, to a localized marketing.
Yeah. No, thank you. That's interesting, and I'd love to really unpack that a bit as well as going. I mean, you've got a ton of experience in taking companies global, indirectly and directly. Well, what are your biggest learnings? I mean, if we'll focus specifically on Asia Pacific, we saw some massive growth, and very, very quickly, but it was also an incredibly, well, at least what I saw was an incredibly pointed way that we want to go about it, and it was also nuanced, to use your word, around each of the different countries. So, like, how have you been successful, and what are your learnings there?
Yeah, there's a couple that I think from a partner standpoint, as you mentioned before, I had the opportunity to run the partner organization, channel sales organization within Akamai for, I guess it was around 7 years or so. There's a common approach that I've seen companies make, and we were just as guilty as doing that in the early days of Akamai as any, when it comes to trying to go into a new market. And that is, you find some seller that is at headquarters that is an expat from that country, or is willing to put up their hand and go over there, and just say, hey, listen, just catch as catch can. Just try to sell as many. Here's some lighthouse accounts. It'd be great to have. They do a sort on biggest companies in that country, and just say, hey, go hammer those down. So they go do that. It takes longer than usual, because there's a lot of things that you took for granted that weren't set up, that needed to be set up, but you're just like, hey, just get out there and get it done. And so they that poor rep slogs through possibly 18 months worth of just banging their heads up against the wall. But they end up getting let's say 10 good wins that are big companies, lighthouse companies, and then we go, okay, well, this market might be worth us putting some more resources into, start investing in something. And so, okay, so let's start thinking about how we actually get some marketing in there to help. Let's hire a sales engineer within that market. Oh shoot, we should probably get some partners there in that particular market. And so let's go out and find some partners. Well, you already have close 10 of the best companies in that particular market directly, and you go and you talk to the partner and you say, hey, here's all this great things you can do, and oh, by the way, don't sell to these companies. And they go, well, those are our 10 of our top customers as well. So like, why would I want to be your partner if you've already got an install base here, blocking this for ability? So basically, you've taken away what could have been a treasure trove for that partner, when instead you could have actually just started with that partner as your go-to-market kind of tip of the spear, with a channel account manager or whatever to help that partner and go after those same 10 and get those 10 sold. They were already that company's top 10 customers anyways. They already had an install base. You can put it on their contract, their paper, and you've now got a a region jump started for you as you go. So that's one thing I think that we ran into a number of times where we just kind of went about it backwards. We learned that lesson, and then we started opening up new territories with that kind of partner first model, which was good. We also, like I said, we also very commonly just start with that sales rep, and that sales rep would have no support, no sales engineer, no marketing support, no website support. The website would still just kind of click back to the corporate site. If it's in Australia, that's okay. But if you're in Korea or in Tokyo or mainland China or Malaysia, that isn't okay, right? That's they're not going to be as open to diving into a relationship with a company that isn't showing a lot of signs that they're serious about a particular market. If they're not willing to do things like translate a website or have more than just one person on the ground, or I remember at one point we were supporting Korea out of LA. So what message does that send the customers that we're selling that we're really not that serious about this particular market? And so that's tough. And the nice thing from a marketing standpoint is you can get away with supporting Korea from LA if you've got the right window dressings, right? If you make it look like you're serious, and they won't ever know that it's a cheap veneer that's standing in the way of actually having a bunch of feet on the street within Korea. If we have a Korean website, if that Korean website's not just a translated version of the U.S. website, but actually a localized website that is talking about in Korean initiatives or Korean events, and the stock imagery is very Korean culture focused. Then all of a sudden they go to that website and they're like, oh, okay, this company's pretty serious about this. This site is they might not even know that it's not a Korean website company until they go to the About Us and find out anything different. And then it's always tough. Flying in from the U.S. and trying to, Black Hat security conference in Singapore here, and I think it's about another month. Supporting Black Hat from the U.S., flying into Black Hat Singapore and trying to run that show by flying in, 3 days before and making sure that the booth comes over and not knowing that I didn't even realize all the electricity was different, and I don't have all the connectors. I don't have any contacts here, feet on the street to help me on last minute things that always pop up for in a particular event. I don't know any of the media companies that are in Singapore, so I can get some echo chamber surround sound to this to event in our presence here. There's just so many things that you take for granted until you get to one of these countries that you don't know, you've never been to, you don't do business in. It's just nuances that you're going to take years for you to learn and get right, that are going to delay your ability to ramp up and be successful. In fact, you and I have a friend of ours that that exactly this exact situation was sent over from Boston, with this company to sell in Australia because he was Australian. And had sales experience. In fact, I think he was running sales training. So, the guy runs sales training. He probably knows how to sell. Sent him over, and that's exactly what happened. He didn't have a sales engineer. They didn't even think about things like, we don't have Australian contracts for this sales rep to actually close a deal in Australia. It has to be put on American paper, and actually the Australian companies don't want to do that, interestingly enough, especially the ones that are government agencies. And interestingly enough, the government agency was one of the number one vertical for this particular company. And it was just things that they just took for granted that was just going to be easy, because Australia was an English speaking country, and it seems kind of like a United States in better weather, with better beaches. And so, let's just give it a go, and let's just see how it goes. Well, it didn't go that well. In fact, he beat his head up against the wall for 2 years and finally left the company. And I don't even know if they're even doing Australian operations anymore because they did it wrong, right? They didn't think about those things. And quite honestly, they didn't think about them because they'd never done it before. And they didn't go about it the right way. Like, don't take for granted that, get some local help. Get people who know the legal aspect of the sales contract, who know the marketing side on where to actually focus your efforts on. What are the the key city and markets in Australia to focus on that particular product, and what are some of the events that are going on in that particular market that we can go, and how do we do non-industry events, but actually field marketing events, and where would we do those, and how where would we host them? Should we do it in a hotel room? No, Australians love to do it in bars. Let's do it upstairs at a pub, and that's actually going to draw some good some good attendees, and who do we call? How do we actually put butts in seats, and all those things. You once again, know how to do it in the States, but you don't know how to do it in Australia. And even if you know how to do it in Australia, you don't know how to do it in Singapore. If you know how to do it in Singapore, you certainly don't know how to do it in Korea or Japan, and in mainland China, as those nuances just get more and more and more complex. So
yeah, that's awesome insight. Thank you.
yeah.
And because no, you're right. Is sometimes there's this assumption that we're just going to go market in Asia Pacific, or we're just going to go sell, and then we're just going to market. And it's like there's a heck of a lot more to it than that. And I guess we always find that it's this balancing act between having centralized support, because you absolutely need the centralized support with the website. You've got your centralized marketing teams and all of that stuff, but then giving the field level autonomy as well. So saying, this is what we're trying to achieve.
Yes.
Let's go and build a level of prioritization. Let's kind of work through that checklist, get that window dressing done as you are, be very, very specific, and then slowly look to expand.
That's right. And I think I'm glad you brought that up. And autonomy is one thing that I am a big believer in. Put in the fence posts that where you need to put them in, and then let the people on the ground do the work, and use the creativity and the local knowledge to be able to do that work. And I think one of the things that corporate marketing always runs into is like, oh gosh, if we just let the field kind of do their thing out there, on the other side of the earth, what's the brand going to look like, and what's the messaging going to be? And oh my God, I can't imagine. No, just here's the style guide, here's the message guide. I'm going to give that to you. That's the confines in which I need you to stay in. Outside of that, localize the way you need to localize, so it resonates within the audience that you're hitting on. And I think that's obviously it's hard to let go of those reins, but when you do, and you empower the local resources to leverage their creativity and their local knowledge, you're going to see them execute probably in many cases better than even your local resources are executed in the United States. And we saw that time and time again. Sure, there's going to be times where like you'll see something and you're like, well, that's a little outside the confines of the style guide. I mean, you may call and say, hey, that was fine, that went out. There's just a little tweak there, so we don't use that that color or that font or whatever else it is. But like, trust me, it's not going to be the end of the world if that happens. And I promise you the benefits will far outweigh the occasional hiccup that you'll find, because those hiccups happen at your headquarters just as much as they happen outside.
Yeah. Well, that's it. And so there's more upside there. And it's fascinating that you say, I suppose as a leader, as a marketing leader, your ability to kind of be able to deal with a little bit of ambiguity, or maybe a lot of ambiguity out there, I feel is important. And you mentioned something saying really interesting, is that you got your guardrails there. And is there anything that you do, like specifically as a marketing leader, to go, we're going to put someone out in region. The first 12 months is just about localization and going and doing that and aligning with sales, and just basically, just work to get the message out there. Do you have any tactical things that you would say to a marketer, like, in the first month, this is what you should be looking to achieve, and then over the next 3 months, I know it's quite an open-ended question, but it's also to build that trust between field and central, too, just to make sure that you're on the right track?
Yeah, quite honestly, I think that if I were dropping a field marketer into a region, let's say they had 4 or 5 sales reps and a sales leader, and they were just starting off, I, I would say, listen, field marketer, you need to spend your first month or maybe even your first 3 months owning the number and the prospecting and the sales as much as the sales reps are owning it, because you need to see the obstacles and the challenges the field is running into in that local market. So you can now take that knowledge back and create prescriptions on how to solve that from a field marketing standpoint. As a field marketing, that's your job. Your job is to grease the skids for the sales reps, as you would imagine. And you have got to gain that trust and collaboration with the sales reps and the sales leader. And I just got through meeting with all of our sales directors, so the second line sales leaders in Vegas a couple of weeks ago. And my main message to them around our field marketers is that we hire very, very smart and accomplished field marketers. I've got field marketers. I would say almost half of my field marketers have marketing MBAs. I've got one that has a marketing MBA from Oxford. And so I'm like, it's fantastic. I don't even have my MBA at all. And so we have some really qualified MBA. And I said, you need to be thinking about your field marketers as if they are your head of marketing. Don't look at me. Don't look at the vice president of field marketing. Look at your field marketing in your region as your partner, as your head of marketing. And I have given them the authority, budget and decision making authority to be able to be your partner and execute what is most important and prioritized for your market based on your 2 communications. And that's super important. That relationship is key. So anyway, so that first 3 months is really understanding, what is the plight of that sales rep. Walk a mile in their shoes. Understand, how is the message resonating with the prospects and the customers. And then if it is wildly off, if hey, we know the message is working great in the U.S., but boy, it's just not resonating here. Then as a field marketer, now your job is to advocate for your market back to product marketing and corporate marketing and say, hey, we might need to do a turn on the messaging that makes it a little bit more applicable or resonant here in this particular area or this particular locality. And so that would be key. I think walk a mile in their shoes. Then verify either the message is on point and is working, or it's not working, and champion the adjustment of that message for the local market. And then once you've got all that done and you kind of hit step 1 and step 2, then it starts to kind of execute on what is our best marketing mix of programs and events that we're going to do to generate awareness and engagement with the key prospect list of the market. So I know my ideal customer profile for this particular region. I have on the wall the list of all the companies that this sales team is trying to hit. So I've got my top 100 of this company. So now I've got a mix of ABM. I've got a mix of field events that I'm going to do, and a mix of maybe industry events that I'm going to do, and I got to look at how best to optimize that mix to get the highest level of results within that. And then I think that it's always good. I always love traveling to regions and hearing the field marketers come up with these ideas that say, hey, I love what we're doing at corporate on this particular initiative. I want to do that here in this market, but I want to do it in this way so it actually means something to this. Because showing that taking your global threat survey and just saying, hey, let's see if we can execute it and send it to all of our contacts here in Seoul is not going to resonate. It's not translated, and it's a global survey. Who cares about it in Seoul? But if I can take the data, or if I can take that same methodology of the survey but execute it in Seoul, translate it into Korean, and now compare it and contrast it between what's happening in Korea from a security standpoint and what's happening around the globe, and how the Korean market is contrasting in some of the priorities to what everybody else in the world is. Boy, that's an interesting model, or sorry, an interesting content asset to be able to execute in that, and you're going to get a lot more awareness and pickup and discussions with both media, and also be able to do webinars and whatnot. So that's an easy little tweak that a field marketer can do on a global campaign to make it a very localized asset for them. So.
That's awesome. That's great insight again, and I guess it does come back to particularly early days for it is the ability to be able to just be super targeted as well. So we could be rolling things out with this global air cover and all that. However, the idea that that you'd rather focus the resources on, having your top account list, doing something really specific with them, and then being able to sell. And obviously building the database and all that sort of thing would come with that over time. But I guess it's about having a lot of intent around what your strategies actually are.
Right. And then I think it's some interesting things going on, right? Like, obviously in the last, whatever it is, 5 or 6 years, we've had to deal with things like GDPR in Europe. And then of course there's been almost like a global adoption with GDPR. United States obviously had to deal with the California Consumer Privacy Act, and which scared the heck out of me, because I thought they were going to end up doing it in every state in the United States, a different one. But luckily, the point there is there's all these little nuances that are popping up, right? And how do we apply a European law in Australia, or is there an Australian law that I don't even realize is out there that I need to be thinking about? And then if I've got a BDR team that's helping with the demand generation, what works as far as outreach in the United States or in England or in Germany may not work at all in Vietnam or in Malaysia or Singapore, or Australia for that matter. And so that's a tough lesson learned, that they go, okay, well, we're just going to beat the phones, and that's how we're going to do it. And then you find out after 3 months of, or 5 months, or God forbid, 9 months of failure in firing BDRs and hiring new ones because it's not getting anything done, to find out that people in Australia don't answer the phone. Do it over email, or do it over LinkedIn. LinkedIn is actually the best method. Or hey, by the way, did you know that that the best way to get a hold of prospects in Malaysia is WhatsApp? Hey, American company, I bet you didn't know that. Those are the things that you don't even think about. Or hey, by the way, do it in China, do it on WeChat, and I bet you that 90% of your marketing team don't even know what WeChat is. But that is a major communication vehicle for the China market. So those are the things that you just take for granted, that you don't know, and you're going to have to either make the mistakes and prolong your success of going to market in that particular market, or you're going to leverage some local expertise and fast track that. It's your choice.
Yeah, cool. Thank you. Well, that's awesome, mate. And it's probably a good note to start to wrap things up on as well, just because I'm cognizant. Well, you're in Boston at the moment.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, it's it's
all
getting
good.
late.
All good.
Your time. And so, do you have any kind of, I don't know, parting words, or like anything about like what are you thinking the future is holding? I mean, there's been a huge kind of evolution of what we're doing, like with marketing, where you could just a few years ago, EDMs, you could do this big spray and pray, and it was all about the volume-based game, and you can just kind of do that. But then you come into some of these markets, particularly like Australia, and if you are targeted, you just can't afford to do that because we don't have the volume here in many aspects. And that's the same as Singapore, sure, some of the other countries do, but we've seen it go from this volume-based play to now needing to be a bit more specific, account-based marketing, all of that sort of stuff there. And I guess in the context of knowing that, and with Asia Pacific as well, what do you think the next couple of years is going to hold for, like, I guess, smart marketing in the B2B space?
Well, I think the really cool thing and fascinating time to be a marketer, in the last 10 years, just technology has just kind of skyrocketed. I remember going to MarTech conference in San Francisco back in, boy, it must have been like 2013, and they put up a slide that had all the MarTech companies, and it was like, I don't know, 45 companies. You can actually find this if you Google MarTech and companies. This slide now, you can't even, the logos are so small you can't even see them. There's so many of them out there, right? We went from a time where it was spray and pray. I mean, the 20 years ago, the coolest thing that we could do was we can use a direct mailing company that can actually put Russ Smith, and put your name on it, or kind of make it look like I was writing a personalized note to you and send it to you. Now there is so much marketing technology that we can leverage to be scalpel accurate with our marketing, which is what we have to do. I mean, you think about it. We're certainly seeing marketing budgets increase. I think that's a factor not of companies just having more money to throw at marketing. I think it's a factor of marketing being much more capable of reporting back the ROI and the impact of our efforts. And once we're able to do that and show that there's a predictability in those results, now the companies are going, okay, so when we look at our OpEx envelope at the end of the year, we know that we can spend such and such money here in marketing and get XYZ for the year, with all those metrics. And so it's becoming a much more metric-driven ROI and predictable machine. So with that said, between the metrics and the technology, and that we're coming out of this crazy pandemic, there's a lot of things kind of converging, right? In Asia Pacific, like I said, there's so many different nuances that you might have to have completely different approaches in market from a digital standpoint as well. It's easy to do it differently from a field marketing standpoint. Think about that. Think about that. My field marketer in Singapore can do different things, completely different things than my field marketer in Japan, completely, and that's fine. But how do you think about taking your digital strategy and making it nuanced and different by geo? So you're gonna have to use geofencing and geo-targeting from a website, translated, localized, and then think about what programs and what vehicles I'm leveraging from a digital standpoint for this market that I'm not going to be able to repurpose for this market. It makes for a very complicated and challenging equation to think about. You lose some economies of scale, but what you lose in economies of scale, you gain in effectiveness and return on investment. And it's a scary leap to take.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you right now, if you don't take it, you like I said before, you're just prolonging your ability to succeed in that particular market. So I think that with the technology, with the metric driven businesses that we have now, and with leveraging companies like CSG, where we can get some expertise, understand what are those nuances in those local markets, so we can do those adjustments, and how can CSG help us maybe even execute on some of those programs, digital or field, that will be much easier for me to be able to outsource that to you with those local expertise, with my style guide, with my messaging and our collaboration. Boy, that makes for a very quick execution versus trying to grab somebody that's at corporate headquarters and saying, hey, try to figure out how to run this in Singapore, or fly over there. Boy, I'm flying to Sydney in 4 weeks. I'm flying business, but my flight is $15,000. That's how much travel is now. Gas, the price of gasoline, and the JP4 and the planes.
Yeah.
Like, so
give us 15 grand.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I mean, I could give you 15 grand and you can go do what I was going to do, and it'll be, and the fact that you guys know that market better than I do, and already, and you can actually spend a few weeks running up to it with time zone and local market knowledge. It's probably going to be a much better ROI if I just did that. So anyway, I'd probably tick off my my local team if I told them I was canceling. And a couple of the people that you actually know on that team would be calling you up. But anyway, but I mean, those are the things that we have to think about. I mean, those are the dollar trade-offs, and once again, yes, the control trade-off, but trading that off for autonomy and ultimately better results is always going to be a better decision. So anyway.
Yeah, that's fascinating. That cross budget thing is really interesting now as well, where you say, well, we had this for travel, and it's like, but now we can actually say with a level of predictability, if we were to have this $15,000 that we would usually use on getting yourself to Sydney or wherever, we know that it's going to be able to produce X million dollars a pipeline.
Yeah.
Well,
absolutely.
And almost maybe yourself as the marketing lead will go, geez, I'm going to take the pipeline. Actually,
right.
gets as close to goals.
Right. Absolutely. And like, you know, Black Hat, and that was a real example. So we're going to be at Black Hat. I'm not sending anybody over there. You know, we do have a local resource in Singapore that's going to execute that, but it's kind of an experiment for us here at this company. We haven't done Black Hat before. In my experience with Black Hat Singapore is not a good one. I've never really had a lot of success with Black Hat Singapore. And if I didn't have local resources, I would probably say no. Or then we just foregone it, and that may not have been the right decision. It would have been better for me to say, maybe I will do that, but maybe I can, can once again leverage, a company like yourself, where I can say, hey, we're going to do this. We're doing it as an experiment. I need to see what I can get out of it. Here's the meetings I need. Here's what I'm going to set up, and here's the presence we want, and see if you can come back and return a good ROI. And then if we can, then we'll do it again next year. We'll do it at in a bigger splash. So
yeah, excellent. So, well, hey mate, it's been awesome catching up, having a bit of a chat.
It has, my friend. We gotta do this in person at some point. And one of these days I'll have to get over to Perth. It's the coast that I have yet to get over to in Australia, as you know, but. We got to figure that out. We got to figure that out.
On the West Coast for sure. But hey, look, I really appreciate your time, your insight. It's been great. Your experience is as good as anyone's, and particularly, as I said, being able to rapidly scale teams globally, both directly, indirectly, and having a genuine appreciation. I mean, you're a man from Texas as well, and your appreciation. People would say Texas being the epicenter of the United States and all of that, but your appreciation for you use the term, the nuances that are required when you're working globally is just phenomenal. And I've appreciated it working under you when we did, and it's clearly held you in good stead. So thanks for the chat, mate. I really appreciate it.
Listen, it was my pleasure. It was always great talking to you, my friend. And as I've told you this in the past, I've learned just as much from you as you have from me. So always happy to get together.